The golden sunset bathed the wide boulevard in honeyed light. Luxury cars hummed past, their tinted windows flashing like polished obsidian. Among the endless stream of elegance and wealth stood a frail figure, barefoot on the cracked sidewalk, a little black girl, no older than 13, with tattered clothes and hopeful eyes. A cardboard sign hung from her neck, hand-painted with trembling strokes, "I can help. Please ask." Most pedestrians ignored her, noses high, stepping around her like she was invisible. But destiny has a strange sense of timing. A sleek black limousine rolled to a slow stop near her spot, the door swung open, and out stepped a man whose very aura commanded attention, Mr. Alastair Hartwell, a self-made millionaire, infamous for his no-nonsense attitude and stone-cold demeanor. In his arms was his young son, Elliot, no older than 9, pale and fragile, his legs limp and useless after a tragic accident. Mr. Hartwell caught the girl's eyes for just a second. She didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward boldly, a rare fire in her voice. "Sir," she said, her voice shaking but loud enough, "I know how to make your son walk again." The bodyguards instantly stepped between them, shoving her back roughly. Passers-by stopped to gawk, some pulling out their phones to record the commotion. Hartwell raised a hand, signaling them to wait. His icy blue eyes studied the girl, searching for a trick, a scam, a lie. But she simply stood there, trembling yet defiant. A storm of curiosity and irritation battled inside him. Finally, he spoke, his voice like distant thunder. "Is that so?" he said. "Explain yourself." And with that, fate began weaving a tale no one could have ever imagined. Amar. Hartwell's voice, rough like gravel, hung in the air. The black beggar girl tightened her fists at her sides. Around them, a crowd had begun to gather, sensing drama, smelling scandal. But she paid them no mind. Her entire world narrowed to the tired, suspicious eyes of the man before her. "I can heal him," she said again, more firmly this time. "I have the gift." The bodyguards exchanged mocking glances, smirking as if she were a mad child. A few bystanders laughed openly. A beggar girl? Healing paralysis? Absurd. But Mr. Hartwell didn't laugh. Not yet. He knelt slightly, shifting his son's weight. Elliot's head lolled weakly against his shoulder, eyes closed, lost in exhaustion. For a moment, Mr. Hartwell's tough mask cracked, just slightly. "If you're lying to me," he growled low enough that only she could hear, "I'll make sure you never beg again, because you'll never speak again." The threat hung in the space between them. Yet the girl didn't back down, she nodded solemnly as if already accepting any fate that might come. "My name is Amara," she said. "Please. Give me just one chance." Mr. Hartwell straightened, considering her. His rational mind screamed against the idea. It was foolish. Dangerous. Embarrassing. And yet, some whisper of hope long buried, stirred inside him. "Fine," he said coldly. "One chance, right here. Right now." Gasps rippled through the crowd. People moved closer, phones held high to catch every second of this spectacle. A beggar girl attempting to heal a millionaire's crippled son, it was a story too unbelievable to miss. Amara nodded once, solemnly, and then knelt before Elliot. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out. The boulevard, usually alive with noise, seemed to hold its breath. Amara closed her eyes and placed her small, calloused hands gently on Elliot's legs. The boy stirred slightly, as if sensing something new. Mr. Hartwell stood rigid, fists clenched, jaw tight, while the crowd leaned in closer, whispering doubts and jokes under their breath. To them, it was entertainment. To Amara, it was sacred. She whispered under her breath, words that sounded foreign to many listening. They weren't in any known language but carried a melody, a vibration that seemed to ripple through the air. The crowd's mocking laughter slowly faded into uneasy silence. Amar. Hartwell felt it too, a strange warmth building around them, an invisible pulse that made the hairs on his arms stand up. Still, he fought the hope rising inside him. too battered by years of false promises and miracle cures that had led now here. Minutes passed like hours. Suddenly, Elliot's fingers twitched at Amar. Hartwell's breath caught in his throat. He crouched lower, staring at his son's legs. There it was again, a definite, undeniable twitch. The boy's toes curled slightly, something he hadn't done in 3 long years. The crowd gasped. Amara's voice grew louder now, her tone command, almost fierce. The vibrations around them intensified, felt even by those standing furthest away. And then, in one miraculous moment, Elliot's legs jerked, clumsily, weakly, but undeniably alive. Amar. Hartwell stumbled back as if struck. Tears he thought had dried forever sprang to his eyes. The bystanders were no longer mocking. They were silent, their disbelief heavy in the air. Elliot opened his eyes, dazed, and looked up at his father. "Daddy," he whispered. Amara slumped forward, exhausted, her breathing shallow, but her work was not yet done. The moment Elliot's legs twitched, the marketplace exploded into chaos. Some people screamed, others shouted over one another, and many simply stood there, jaws hanging open in utter disbelief. Amar. Hartwell rushed forward, grabbing Elliot's feet in his large, trembling hands, feeling the slight but undeniable movement. Tears rolled down his face, but so did suspicion. "How?" he demanded, his voice breaking. "How did you do that?" Amara, breathing heavily, pushed herself up to her knees. Her hands were shaking, her lips pale. She looked at Mr. Hartwell with tired but determined eyes. "I didn't heal him yet," she said, her voice weak but steady. "I just woke something sleeping inside." Doctors from nearby clinics rushed toward the scene. They pushed through the crowd, stethoscopes swinging, their expensive suits and white coats gleaming in the sun. "This is impossible," barked one physician, glaring at Amara. "This is a trick, some cheap parlor magic." Another doctor knelt to examine Elliot, pulling out a flashlight to check his pupils, shaking his limbs carefully. His frown deepened. "There's no logical explanation," he muttered under his breath, casting Amara a suspicious glance. Reporters who had been covering a nearby event caught wind of the commotion. Cameras were soon flashing, microphones shoved into Amara's exhausted face. "Who are you? What magic is this? Are you a fraud?" She didn't answer them. Her eyes stayed on Elliot, the boy she had promised to help. He needed more. This was only the beginning. Amar. Hartwell raised a hand to silence the reporters. His powerful voice boomed across the marketplace. "Let her finish." The doctors protested. The journalists cried foul, but Mr. Hartwell didn't care. For the first time in years, his son had moved, and if there was even a tiny chance left, he was ready to bet everything. The angry murmurs of the doctors and journalists buzzed like angry bees around them, but Mr. Hartwell ignored them all. He turned to Amara, his face a mask of fierce hope and grim determination. "What do you need?" he asked simply. Amara blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. She had never been asked what she needed, not by anyone. She took a shaky breath. "A quiet place," she said. 3 days. No interruptions, and complete trust. The doctors exploded again. "This is madness. You're risking your son's life on superstition. Sir, please let real medicine handle this." Mr. Hartwell turned to them slowly, like a mountain moving. "My son's been under your real medicine for 5 years, he growled. "And he hasn't taken a single step." Silence fell. Even the boldest reporters hesitated. "Give her what she asks for," Mr. Hartwell barked to his assistants. "Anything she needs." Within an hour, arrangements were made. Amara and Elliot were moved to one of Hartwell's private estates just outside the city, a beautiful place surrounded by forests and lakes, far from the noise of skeptical eyes. Amara, still dressed in her tattered clothes, stood awkwardly in the grand hall of the mansion. Marble floors gleamed beneath her bare feet. Golden chandeliers sparkled overhead. She looked comically out of place, a broken bird inside a king's palace. A maid approached her nervously. "Miss, your room is ready." Amara nodded. But before she went anywhere, she turned to Mr. Hartwell. "I need you to promise me something," she said. He nodded, no matter what you see or hear in the next 3 days, she whispered, you cannot interfere. Even if it terrifies you. Amar Hartwell hesitated, but then he placed his hand over his heart. You have my word. The first night fell like a heavy curtain over the estate. Stars pierced the velvet sky, and a deep hush swallowed the mansion. In a small, empty ballroom cleared just for them, Amara sat cross-legged on the polished floor, a candle flickering at her feet. Across from her, Elliot sat in his wheelchair, nervous but wide-eyed. Amara spoke in a soft, melodic voice. Elliot, do you believe you can walk again? The boy's lips trembled. I don't know. She smiled gently. You don't have to know. You just have to believe it's possible. Elliot nodded, hesitant but willing. Amara closed her eyes and began to hum, a strange, haunting tune that didn't sound like anything from this world. The candle flame twisted and danced with her voice, casting long, living shadows on the walls. Outside the ballroom, Mr. Hartwell stood behind a one-way glass window, hands clenched at his sides that he had promised not to interfere. But his heart pounded painfully in his chest as he watched. Amara lifted a small pouch from her tattered coat and sprinkled a fine, shimmering dust into the air. The particles glittered like 1,000 tiny stars. Elliot inhaled sharply as the dust settled over him, and for the first time in years, he felt something in his legs. A tingling. A warmth. Amara opened her eyes, now glowing faintly golden. She reached out her hands. Take my hands, Elliot. Trust me. The boy hesitated, then grasped her fingers, and slowly, shakily, Amara guided him up. His legs wobbled. His arms trembled. But for a brief, heart-stopping moment, Elliot stood. The first step of the impossible had begun. The moment Elliot's feet touched the ground, a gasp echoed through the mansion behind the glass. Mr. Hartwell staggered back, his mouth falling open. For a moment, the impossible seemed possible, but just as quickly, Elliot's legs buckled, and he fell back into the wheelchair. Tears of frustration welled in the boy's eyes. I can't, he cried, his fists pounding his thighs. I thought I could, but I can't. Amara knelt beside him, her hands firm yet gentle on his trembling arms. No, Elliot, she said softly. You did stand. Even for a second. That means the fire inside you is still alive. But Elliot shook his head fiercely. I'm broken. I'll always be broken. From behind the glass, Mr. Hartwell turned away. His heart was breaking anew. He wondered, was this just cruel hope being dangled in front of his son? Suddenly, the door to the ballroom burst open. Mrs. Langston, the family's loyal housekeeper, rushed in. Sir. You must come quickly. There's someone outside. They're looking for the girl. Amara's face paled. She knew this would happen. She wasn't just a beggar, she was someone wanted. Whispers of her strange abilities had spread beyond the city slums, and dangerous men had taken notice, men who didn't believe in healing, only in controlling her gifts for their own gain. Amar Hartwell made a swift decision. Lock the gates, he ordered. Mrs. Langston, bring her to the library. We need to talk. Amara glanced at Elliot, guilt flashing in her eyes. She hadn't told him everything, not yet, but now, the past was catching up to her, and it could destroy everything. In the grand, wood-paneled library, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Amar Hartwell sat behind an enormous mahogany desk, his hands steepled before his face. Amara stood opposite him, her posture rigid, her eyes wary. Elliot, stubborn despite his trembling legs, had demanded to be present too. He sat nearby, clutching the armrests of his chair tightly, his gaze flickering between his father and the mysterious girl who had given him hope. Mr. Hartwell's voice broke the silence. Who are you really, Amara? He asked, his tone measured but heavy. And why are dangerous men looking for you? Amara hesitated. Her hands clenched at her sides. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but strong. I was born in a village far from here, she began. A place where unusual gifts were not celebrated, but feared. When I was a baby, my touch healed a wounded bird. As I grew, people whispered that I was cursed or blessed, they couldn't decide which. Her gaze dropped. My parents were poor. They sold me to a man who promised them riches. He wanted to own my gift. To use it for money, for power. Elliot's mouth fell open in shock. I ran away, Amara continued. I've been running ever since. Hiding. Surviving. But when I saw your son, when I saw how trapped he was, I had to help. Mr. Hartwell leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. You risked everything for a boy you didn't even know, he said slowly. Amara met his gaze firmly. Because he deserves a life. Not a prison. For a long moment, silence hung between them, then Mr. Hartwell stood, his decision clear in his mind. If you're willing to trust us, he said, then we'll protect you. But outside the gates, shadowy figures gathered, plotting their next move. The real battle had only just begun. Night draped the mansion in darkness, but inside, the light of resolve burned brightly to Amar. Hartwell moved swiftly, calling his most trusted security chief. Within an hour, guards doubled at every entrance. Cameras flickered to life, scanning the grounds for intruders. Amara stayed close to Elliot, who clung to his determination like a lifeline. In his room, Elliot stared at his trembling legs that he could almost feel a tingling, the barest sign of something stirring deep within, hope. It was more terrifying than despair. Downstairs, Mr. Hartwell prepared for a confrontation he could hardly understand. He was used to battling corporations, not men who trafficked in powers beyond belief. Suddenly, the estate alarms blared, shadows breached the outer wall. Masked men, swift and silent, scaled the gates with ease. They weren't ordinary criminals, they moved like trained hunters. Amara stood at the top of the staircase, facing them down with nothing but her thin frame and fearless. Hartwell rushed to her side. You can't fight them, he hissed. They're dangerous. Amara's face was serene. I'm not going to fight them, she whispered. I'm going to end this. The first man lunged. Before he could touch her, Amara pressed her palm against his chest. A light, so faint it was almost invisible, shimmered under her hand. The man collapsed to the floor, not dead, but utterly still, his mind emptied of malice. One by one, they fell, not through violence, but through a strange peace that Amara spread with a touch. Upstairs, Elliot struggled to his feet, sensing the energy flowing through the house. He staggered, then took one trembling step forward. Unaided, downstairs, Mr. Hartwell could only watch in awe as Amara saved them all, not with fists, but with grace. The night wasn't over yet, but a new dawn was coming. The fight ended as quickly as it had begun, the last intruder lying motionless in the foyer, his mind wiped clean of intent. The air in the mansion seemed to shift, as if the weight of the world had been lifted in one gentle exhale. Amara stood alone in the center of the room, her hands now still. She glanced up at Mr. Hartwell, whose jaw hung open in disbelief. I never thought. He began, but words seemed to fail him. He looked at his son, Elliot, now standing tall at the top of the stairs, leaning against the banister. His face was pale but filled with a fierce spark. Elliot took a deep breath, steadying himself. He moved cautiously, as though the mere act of standing had been a gift too fragile to test. I'm standing. Amara, Elliot whispered, his voice barely audible, as if afraid to believe it. How did you do this? He asked, his eyes wide with wonder. Amara's smile was soft but knowing. I didn't make you walk, Elliot. You did. You're the one who trusted your heart. I just helped you see it was still possible. Mr. Hartwell stood beside his son, his hands trembling as he reached out. Thank you, Amara, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You've done more than I could ever repay. She simply nodded, her gaze flickering to the window where the first hints of dawn were beginning to color the sky. The world doesn't always make sense, she said quietly, but sometimes, healing doesn't need to be understood. It just needs to be believed. With a final look at the two of them, Amara turned and moved toward the door. Amar. Hartwell's hand shot out instinctively, but she stopped him with a soft shake of her head. I'm not here to stay, sir. I'm here to make sure you all remember that some roads can only be walked with faith. And with that, she was gone, but her presence lingered, in the air, in the silence that followed, in the renewed hope now blooming inside the walls of the Hartwell mansion. For the first time in years, Elliot smiled as he took another steady step, his path before him clear. If you enjoyed this story of hope, healing, and unexpected miracles, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful tales that remind us all of the strength within. Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain, but just knew it was real? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story, and remember, sometimes the greatest healing comes not from fixing what's broken, but from believing in the impossible. Stay inspired and keep believing.